Hi everyone, welcome back. In this short flight around KSBA Santa Barbara, I'll discuss my thoughts and impressions on the flight model of the default Bell 407 since Sim Update 12. Sim Update 12 added the ability to increase the engine RPM and also turn the governor on and off, which I've been able to test the governor on and off, and that's working correctly. I have not had a chance to check the engine trim. And you're also able to map the throttle to an axis. That's not working correctly in the Bell 407 at this time. So specific to the Bell 407, there are some other changes that they noted to engine performance, easier to overstress the rotor and stabilize and cruise. Those things would be flight model tweaks specific to that helicopter. And I do think that it's behaving better. I can check that or attest that the low rotor warning sound is working correctly during startup, so that's an improvement there. And small items like the connecting rod animation has also been corrected. So switching views at this point, you can see the difference between the VR recording. When I create these videos, I record in VR real time. It doesn't always make the best video. The head movements are kind of jittery, and the playback is a little hard to watch and pay attention to. So I'll split the screen later and look at the difference between the playback recording and the actual recording in real time in VR. So with the split screen here, you can see this spatial orientation that you gain from VR is really beneficial in flying helicopters. Most of what you're doing depends on the sight picture. So you're referencing 2 points in order to see how the helicopter is moving in relation to them, and you want to make a control input to be ahead of the aircraft. So you're constantly making adjustments and back to center and trying to stay ahead of the aircraft. But it doesn't make for a good video, so for the rest of the video, I'll do the recording from the playback. The flight model for Microsoft helicopters feels pretty good. It generally feels like a helicopter when you fly it. The torque responds correctly. The pedal inputs are light for the Bell 407, but I've never flown a Bell 407 in real life, so it does have a pedal stop feature. And so the pedal stop feature limits the pedal travel above 15 knots. Any helicopter, I would assume, that has a performance that requires a pedal input probably has pretty good pedal authority, so I would say that the pedal authority on the Bell 407 is probably pretty accurate, but it responds correctly. The with the torque inputs of the collective as I would expect it to. When you raise collective, you need to add pedal input, the left pedal. When you lower the collective, you have to put right pedal in. So the movements are correlating correctly, and it flies like a rotor disc. So that segment there, the takeoff was pretty smooth. It transitioned through ETL, and you could feel the transverse flow effect wanting to pitch the rotor disc back. So I had to push the collective forward, and that's exactly how I would expect. These views here of the Santa Barbara area and the photogrammetry are why we're all excited about the flight modeling of Microsoft's simulator getting better, because with these visuals looking like real world actual flight, getting the flight model closer to the actual thing is really where flight simmers have kind of been looking to for the future. And seeing it in VR, it's a whole nother experience. Coming in for approach is where I tend to be a little harsher on the flight models for most sims. Although Microsoft does it better than most simulators, even the much talked about X-Plane, Microsoft tends to be less floaty for helicopters. When you start to come in for your approach and you're slowing down, even when you're well above ETL, you need to start bringing power back in. You add collective sooner than you would expect. I guess once you start getting used to it, you expect it. That's the point. But as you're slowing down below 65 knots, between 65 to 40 knots, you're actually adding collective back in slowly. It's counterintuitive to the fact that you want to keep descending, but you want to keep going forward and down. And Microsoft Flight Simulator's model actually does this better, which I think is why it does quick stops better. I've found that doing quick stops in this simulator is much closer to the real thing, where you can lower the collective and really get the helicopter to descend through its own wash rather than float up above it, which is what I have found in most other simulators. So again, here in VR, to switch back over, you can really see the benefits that you get on approach, since a lot of helicopter flying is seat of the pants, sight picture, and you're moving your view around a lot to look at your closure rates and constantly adjusting the collective and the cyclic to maintain your closure rate and end up at your intended landing spot right into a ground effect hover. The new flight model in Sim Update 12, I think, is actually more like a helicopter than it was before. The pedal inputs are a little bit less than I was anticipating or expecting, but I don't know if that's unrealistic. In my experience, I've flown Robinson helicopters most of the time in R22s and R44s, where I'm much closer to the gross weight limit, which I would anticipate more power requirements, which would require a lot more pedal, being much closer to the gross weight limit. With the 407, I wasn't anywhere near the gross weight limit when I set this flight up, and I would anticipate that a machine that was designed with the capabilities of this being a much more advanced, more expensive, designed to overcome the limitations of the less expensive or older machines, would have more pedal authority. So I think that is probably accurate, but it's responding to the torque correctly. So the movements are correctly, they're correlating to the collective movements. So I think that it's accurate. If you're still here, please like and subscribe. It helps support the channel. Keep practicing. Hovering is one of the hardest skills, especially in a simulator. You don't get to feel the aircraft moving underneath you, and that makes it a little bit harder, so you really have to rely on your visual cues in order to understand what's happening. And it's hard to be ahead of the aircraft, and you have to make constant adjustments and then bring it back to center. So you're balancing where you think the center of gravity of the aircraft is to the center of the controls, and you're adjusting all the little outside influence on the rotor disc that is constantly happening, little adjustments in the wind, momentum, shifts of weight, and adjusting for those things as you're flying. So it takes a lot of time and practice to learn how to hover. So be patient. If you have controllers that have shorter throw, set up curves so that they're not as sensitive. If you're using even shorter throw, like an Xbox type controller, use the assists. The assists are for controller limitations. It's nothing to do with piloting. It really has everything to do with the input factor from the controller. Keep practicing. Don't give up. Eventually it clicks and you get what instructors call the hover button. And everything just kind of makes sense and your muscle memory takes over and you'll just hover. So if you keep practicing, that will happen. Whichever controller you're using, don't keep chasing your settings. Just put your settings in one place and try it out and keep practicing until it clicks. Thanks for watching. Be safe, be kind. I'll see you in the next video.